Number 7. Monique Bohr. On the afternoon of December the 31st of 2019, 28-year-old Monique Bohr, a realtor from Minneapolis, Minnesota, received a call from someone interested in touring a house in Maple Grove. Bohr got there around 3 p.m., but no one else had arrived yet. A short while later, a U-Haul van pulled up to the house. An individual emerged from the vehicle, forced Bohr into the cargo area, and then drove away. Roughly 2 hours later, a masked gunman broke into the home that belonged to Bohr and her boyfriend, John Mitchell Momer. The intruder had used Bohr's key to get inside and proceeded to open fire on Mitchell Momer as he sat on the staircase. At the time of the shooting, his and Bohr's 3-year-old child was sitting on the couch close by, and their 1-year-old was asleep upstairs. Relatives showed up to the house soon after the shooting because it had been prearranged for them to look after the couple's children, while Bohr and her boyfriend were supposed to go out for New Year's Eve. It was then that they discovered Mitchell Momer with multiple gunshot wounds to his torso. He was rushed to the hospital and fortunately survived the incident. Later that night, 3 gunshots were heard being fired in an alley downtown. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Bohr's body. She had been bound by the hands and feet and shot dead with the same gun that was fired at her boyfriend earlier that evening. The ensuing investigation led to the arrests and convictions of multiple suspects. Cedric Lamont Berry and Berry Davis, both aged 42, were charged with first-degree murder and given life sentences for their part in Bohr's kidnapping and killing, and the attempted killing of her boyfriend. 2 other co-conspirators, 36-year-old Lyndon Wiggins and 29-year-old Elsa Segura, were handed down similar charges. Wiggins was sentenced to an additional 19 years in prison for drug trafficking. Wiggins was also found to have been the mastermind behind the plot. He had wanted to get back at Mitchell Momer over a soured record contract and enlisted the help of the 3 other perpetrators. Number 6. April Sorensen. April Sorensen, aged 27, was an aspiring dental hygienist who lived with her husband Joshua in Rochester. On April the 17th of 2007, Sorensen went about her normal routine. She worked a part-time job in the morning and attended classes at a local community college. After returning home in the early afternoon, her day took a tragic turn. A cable technician was scheduled to show up at the house for a service call at around 12:30 p.m. Upon his arrival, however, he heard Sorensen's fire alarm blaring from inside and could see a haze of smoke from the window. He called 911 and firefighters were immediately dispatched to the scene. After extinguishing the blaze, the first responders discovered Sorensen's dead body lying on the bedroom floor. Investigators subsequently conducted a thorough examination of the premises, collecting hundreds of pieces of evidence to help them ascertain what exactly had transpired. An autopsy revealed that Sorensen had been strangled and stabbed to death prior to the fire being started. The authorities determined that the house fire was used by her killer to cover up the murder. There have been multiple suspects over the course of the police investigation, including the cable technician who called in the fire and Sorensen's husband, both of whom were swiftly cleared. The investigation has known little progress since. According to subsequent updates, a $25,000 reward has been offered to anyone with information leading to the murderer's capture. Number 5. America Thayer. At around 2:30 p.m. on July the 28th of 2021, police officers in Shakopee, Minnesota, were notified of a stabbing that occurred in the middle of an intersection in a suburban neighborhood. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they discovered a human head and the headless body it was previously attached to lying on the road. The victim was identified as America Thayer, a 55-year-old Shakopee resident. She had been decapitated by a machete, which the police found discarded in a nearby recycling bin alongside a pile of bloody clothing. It wasn't long before investigators named the prime suspect in Thayer's brutal murder, Alexis Saborit, age 42. Saborit had been in a relationship with Thayer for 7 years prior to the killing, and he was positively identified by multiple eyewitnesses. They found him wandering near the highway roughly 2 miles from the scene of the crime, and he was apprehended without further incident. In conversations with police, Saborit admitted to beheading Thayer after the woman expressed her intention to break up with him. Domestic violence had been an ongoing problem in the couple's contentious relationship, and Saborit had even been issued a restraining order in 2017 before Thayer requested it be removed. On the day of the murder, Saborit was scheduled to appear in court on arson charges after he set fire to his own home. On August 9th of 2021, he was officially charged with second-degree murder for killing his girlfriend. Number 4. Lois Rice. After shooting and killing her own husband, Lois Rice, a grandmother from Blooming Prairie, Minnesota, fled to Florida, where she murdered yet another victim in order to steal her identity. Rice, who was 56 at the time, had gotten into an argument with her husband, David, on March the 11th of 2018. According to Rice's testimony to police, he had given her a loaded gun and told her to take her own life. Rice instead turned the weapon on him, firing multiple rounds into his chest. Upon realizing he was dead, she withdrew $10,000 from his bank account and went on the run. First, she escaped to Fort Myers Beach, Florida, and began searching for a woman who looked enough like her that she could steal their identity. She decided on 59-year-old Pamela Hutchinson, whom she then befriended. On April the 6th, however, Florida police discovered Hutchinson's dead body inside a Fort Myers Beach hotel. The same gun that had taken David Rice's life had been used on Hutchinson as well. A nationwide hunt for Lois Rice began. She was eventually tracked down by U.S. Marshals, who found her in a restaurant in South Padre Island, Texas, on April the 19th. She was given a life sentence in Florida for murdering Hutchinson. In July of 2020, she was extradited back to Minnesota, where she stood trial for the murder of her husband. She apologized to her husband's family and friends as she admitted to killing him. She subsequently received a second life sentence. She will live out the remainder of her years behind bars in Minnesota. Number 3. Terry Brisk. 41-year-old Terry Brisk of Little Falls, Minnesota, was expected to go into work on November the 7th of 2016, but instead, he was found dead on his parents' property. His parents were unaware that he'd taken the day off to go hunting on their land, until they spotted his car parked outside. They decided not to disturb him, but when he failed to return from the wooded section of the property that they commonly use for hunting, the family set out to look for him. They were then met with a harrowing sight as Brisk had been shot dead while on his hunt, and his rifle was missing from the scene. Though investigators initially speculated that Brisk might have taken his own life, the missing rifle seemed to indicate that someone else had carried out the shooting and then fled with the murder weapon. The autopsy confirmed that another party was involved, and the coroner ruled his death a homicide. Despite this discovery, the police struggled to identify any suspects in Brisk's murder. In May of 2021, having made no further progress in the case, the Morrison County Sheriff's Office brought in an outside investigator to aid them in their efforts to bring justice to Brisk's mystery killer. There was a 13-foot memorial stone placed near the area where his body was found on his parents' land. The victim was survived by a wife and 4 children. Today's topic was requested by Steve Guzman, Kevin King, Death Fang, The Gothic Gamer, and NBKLA420. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Justin Damon. 40-year-old Justin Damon's attempts to call on the Minneapolis Police Department for help would trigger a chain of events that led to her own demise. In the late hours of July the 15th of 2017, Damon placed 2 calls to 911. She reported what she believed to be a woman getting assaulted in an alley behind her house. The emergency dispatchers categorized the call as a low-priority tip, potentially because Damon was calling from the relatively low-crime neighborhood of Fulton. Eventually, 2 officers were dispatched to the scene. They were 31-year-old Mohammed Noor and his partner, Matthew Harity, aged 25. Noor was well known within the Minneapolis community for being one of the city's first Somali-American officers. The 2 policemen drove their squad car with its lights turned off down the alley Damon had described to the 911 operator. Upon arriving at the scene of the reported crime, they found nothing to suggest that there had been an attack. At that point, Noor documented in the police car's computer that the scene had been cleared, and the 2 officers prepared to leave. Suddenly, the pair were startled by a loud noise coming from outside their vehicle. At that very moment, a barefoot Damon approached the squad car from the driver's side, further alarming the officers. They both drew their weapons, and Harity kept his gun lowered, but Noor fired a single shot through the window, striking Damon in the midsection. The officers subsequently attempted CPR on the woman, who was unconscious, but she passed away within minutes. Though Noor insisted in the ensuing criminal trial that he was simply acting in self-defense when he shot Damon, he was ultimately convicted of 3rd-degree murder and 2nd-degree manslaughter in June of 2019. He successfully appealed the 3rd-degree murder charge in the Minnesota Supreme Court on September the 15th of 2021. His initial prison sentence was 12.5 years, but following his appeal, nor was scheduled to be resentenced for the lesser manslaughter charge alone. Number 1. The Byron David Smith murders. Byron David Smith, aged 64, brutally killed 2 individuals attempting to burglarize his home in Little Falls, Minnesota. He had retired from a position at the U.S. State Department and lived alone at the time of the incident, which took place on Thanksgiving Day 2012. Smith's residence had been targeted multiple times in the months leading up to the incident, and he had consequently installed a security system in his house to catch the culprits. He also began regularly walking around his home with a loaded gun strapped to his waist. On the day of the killings, Smith had driven his car to a neighbor's home to give the burglars the impression that his house was empty. It wasn't long before 18-year-old Hailey Kiefer and her cousin Nicholas Brady, aged 17, broke into Smith's house with the intention of robbing it. Unbeknownst to them, they were walking into a trap that Smith had laid out for them. He was also inside the home, positioned in a dark corner with his firearm in hand. Smith then turned on a recording device to capture the events that followed. After lying in wait for 12 minutes, he fired 2 shots at Brady as he went down into the basement. The teen fell to the bottom of the stairs, and as he lay wounded on the floor, Smith stood above his body and taunted him. He then fired an additional shot to Brady's head, killing him. Kiefer came looking for her cousin in the basement and was also shot by Smith while climbing down the stairs. She attempted to escape, but Smith shot her multiple times in the torso and the left side of her face, all the while gleefully insulting her. He then delivered the kill shot by discharging his gun into Kiefer's chin. The burglar's dead body sat in Smith's basement for an entire day before he called the police, an aspect he'd later tried to justify by claiming he didn't want to bother anyone on Thanksgiving. He was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. In court, Smith argued that his actions were justified under the Castle Doctrine, which allows homeowners to use lethal force in defense of their residents. The jury was not swayed, however, and he was sentenced to life in prison, with the recording captured by his own device playing a significant role in his conviction. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on one of the links on your screen for more videos.